Welcome back to AI Meets API, the podcast where the future of integration meets the power of artificial intelligence. I'm your producer, Amy, and today we're diving into one of the most exciting frontiers of enterprise technology, the Agentic Era, where AI is redefining how APIs are designed, deployed, and scaled. And joining us for this conversation with our host, Ajay Konda, CGO and co-founder of ProwessSoft, is someone at the forefront of this evolution, Rupesh Ramachandran, head of solution engineering for TMT at MuleSoft and a recognized AI thought leader. Rupesh is helping shape the future from inside MuleSoft's office of the CTO. We'll turn it over to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Amy. Rupesh, welcome to the show. We are very thrilled to have you. And just to kickstart, it's a great introduction we had about you. And you have seen a lot of things in the integration space so far. It's evolved from the traditional ESBs to API-led connectivity. Now we are talking about AI-driven automation. What stand out most in that journey for you?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Great question. I mean, you've probably been in the space as long as I have, but we've seen it evolve from, Mule when it first came out, it was Mule ESB, and then we went on from being an ESB to this whole segment called iPaaS, and it was category defining at the time, and that's actually why I joined MuleSoft because people are starting to move into the cloud, and MuleSoft was one of the first to get in. And here we are now where we have gone from, on-premise to cloud native to now AI and agentic, where it's completely redefining how integration is done.
So one of the latest thing I have seen, Rupesh, from you is you are the one of the collaborators towards this MCP and A2A, and that's been one of the most buzz thing happening right now in the integration space. Can you elaborate a little more on that one and how MuleSoft is helping the organizations?
Yeah. So there's with the whole agentic thing, one thing that we started noticing is interop was not something people started thinking about, especially when everybody from OpenAI, Anthropic, everybody were building their LLMs. Nobody thought agentic would happen and agents have to talk to each other, agents have to talk to systems. So we were looking at what standard we should get behind, and the closest was Model Context Protocol from Anthropic. So we did speak to Anthropic about it, and we were one of the first to launch MCP support, which was a couple of weeks ago. We launched that, and that gives agents tools to do things. So it's an extension of APIs where now there's agent context around an API where an agent or like a chat GPT or a Claude can now interact with checking inventory in SAP or placing an order, all of that through an MCP exposed on Mule, for instance, which just opens up new frontiers, right? That's the MCP part which you asked about. The second was A2A, which is agent to agent. Sure, you gave agent tools with MCP now, but how are the agents going to communicate with each other? Because it's not the agent world is going to be like if the API world was thousands of APIs in an enterprise, the agent world is going to be hundreds of thousands of agents in an enterprise. It's everything is pointing in that direction right now. So the ability for agents to communicate, to swarm, to solve problems, to delegate, all those things and discover each other dynamically, not even like statically from an API registry, but dynamically say, hey, who's available? Who can solve this problem for me? That becomes very important. And then interoperability across agents from different vendors. So these are the two big things that are coming up right now. And we are trying to, steer this standard in the right way.
So, how does this MuleSoft integration overall play in the agent force take away from the Salesforce? Like Salesforce is investing significantly onto the agent force, and a lot of customers are adopting agent force. How does this MuleSoft integration, especially with MCP and A2A, fit into the overall picture of the enterprise business use cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we're seeing multiple waves and multiple types of agents coming out, right? So the first one, the ones that are getting most traction right now, are agents coming out of the box from vendors. So sales coach, BDR agent, and so on from Salesforce that come out. And then Workday has recruiting agents, SAP has their own financial management agents, and so on. So these agents need to talk to each other. That's one of the first problems. Second is platforms to create your own agent, roll out your own agent. And Agentforce is great for, low code way of building agents. For Agentforce, there's knowledge aspect of an agent to know, like using RAG and all of that, where Data Cloud and Agentforce gives you that out of the box for people building agents that are Salesforce customers. But now to take action, yeah, it knows the brain has figured out, okay, based on all the data in Salesforce, I know what to
Mm-hmm.
do. But to do something, there needs to be uh, actionability outside of the Salesforce ecosystem, and that's where MuleSoft comes in. And MuleSoft has capabilities that bridge this for Agentforce, MuleSoft Topic Center, API Catalog. It becomes natively part of Agentforce, where if
Yes.
you're a MuleSoft customer or you've taken
Yes.
an API first approach, you can just natively consume it from Agentforce. So that's a big investment we made first. This is before MCP and A2A and all these standards came out.
Okay. That's great. But from an API professional's point of view, right? How do you see this AI is firmly part of the conversation in the organizations? How do you see some existing shifts has to happen? Especially how do API professionals has to adopt it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So the first thing is it was seen as a nice to have to go API first because near real time was seen as okay, it's almost as good enough as real time. So, but in this world where it's conversational, you could have seen like in ChatGPT when you ask a question, it comes back, it's streaming tokens. It's not sitting and thinking for 5 minutes and then starts sending a big paragraph to you, right? So those kind of capabilities, like being able to stream, there are things that you got to start thinking about as an API creator. For instance, if you're building an API, and if you try to use pagination, for instance, it makes really good sense when it's a mobile app consuming it. When it's
Yes.
an agent consuming it, you want the responses to stream to you, not paginate and give you like 5 records at a time. So there's certain ways to design, keeping agentic in mind. So there's slight shifts in the design process, but otherwise the APIs are the great best. It's a best marriage, MCP with APIs, for instance. It's a match made in heaven.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, definitely there is a lot of excitement. Uh, but also there is some concern, especially about AI's maturity in meeting the enterprise grade needs. What kind of challenges are you seeing from the customers currently?
Yeah, there was a joke going around saying the S in MCP stands for security, and because there was no security information being in
Yeah.
MCP at the time. So we know our customers are the top Fortune 500 big banks and people who are running mission critical workloads on MuleSoft. So you cannot take risk. And the biggest problem right now with AI adoption is risk management.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that in the ilities in the API world where it's real time. So you need stateless, high performance, low latency, highly scalable, security, all of those were important. They're all important in the agentic world, but like I said, the security part, that is even more critical now because you have likelihood of seeing sensitive information when an agent is ad hoc finding and
Mm-hmm.
creating responses. Should this person actually see this response that I have access to now? There's
Mm-hmm.
certain fine-grained entitlements that need to come into play in a dynamic world like
Mm-hmm.
this. Same with observability, with so much hallucination and other things. When agents are communicating with each other, you as a human need to be able to say, why did it make this decision? Why did it cancel that order? Why did it
Mm-hmm.
refund that order? And be able to trace it and figure out what just happened, right? So there are certain things that come to the forefront in this specific world, but all the abilities that used to be there are still there.
Okay, got it. From a domain point of view, right? So you are talking to a lot of the TMT means tech customers and telecom customers. What kind of discussions are the problem statements are you seeing currently from a this specific domain, and how are you trying to address those challenges?
Yeah. So one thing I'm starting to see is, like I said, the risk management is the main thing enterprise customers are looking at. Unlike using ChatGPT, now you're interacting with your crown jewel, very private systems with proprietary data in there. So the way people don't want, especially in high tech, which is where my team works, everybody's got funding this year. Like all the big companies are funding to go do AI projects, and many are science projects, but you cannot wait because it is so disruptive. The ROI is so high if you can automate things like for instance, HR, IT help desk, case deflection, those kind of things, it's very easy to say, okay, this much human time was saved.
Okay.
So everybody wants mad rush to solve these problems, right? Especially operations. But again, the risk is still an issue. So while there's LLMs are getting better, decision making is getting better,
Mhm.
how do we start trying this out without taking on too much risk? So people don't really want to mess with customer data. But employee experience, yeah, if you make a mistake, you can redo it. It's your own internal employee. There's nothing super critical in some use cases. So we are seeing people are starting to experiment more with internal things like HR or internal IT and operations. Those are the lower risk places we are seeing adoption.
Oh, that's where I want to go towards. You already, I think, addressed partially that one. Like, how does organizations has to adopt these AI integration? If I understand correctly, you are suggesting that go after these type of HR and back end processes first
Yeah,
before try to get into the front end processes.
that's right. While you're figuring out your frameworks and your security options and all of that, don't wait.
Mhm.
Start getting into it, but take these low-hanging fruit where the risk is also low. Just measure the two ends.
Rupesh, if I look forward maybe like a 5 or 10 years, how do you envision the future of integration going to be? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's like I said, this is going to be the biggest seismic shift. And one thing it opens up is integration has never really been conversational. It's either a large bulk transaction that happens every night or mobile apps, connecting to systems through APIs and so on. Now, when you have humans interfacing directly and it's conversational, for instance, it could be agents interacting with humans or agents interacting, a headless agent interacting autonomously. Either way, what this opens up is a way to piece together, the API world, you had composability where developers could compose APIs to create processes. Now it's not developers, it's actually autonomous agents that are taking different building blocks, let's say
Mhm.
MCP tools sitting on top of
Mhm.
your APIs. And it can dynamically create processes to solve that human's request. That was
Oh.
never a possibility before. So you know, the 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 opportunity to do something better than a human could have actually statically defined in a workflow.
Mm.
The opportunity to figure out who are the other agents in the enterprise that can help me. Kind of like, if I join a new company, I'll find out who are the different experts and I reach out to them and I need help. Agents are going to do that for you. And that's a whole
Mhm.
different world of integration that's super dynamic, right? So that's really where I see this going.
Oh, that's very interesting. So right now we have the building blocks of the APIs, and then we build the workflow automation or orchestration on top of those APIs to for the business processes. That's where I see that there are some guided goal is defined by the business process, and we try to orchestrate around that business goal.
Yep.
If it is a
That is the logic.
dynamic, yeah, if it is a dynamic, isn't it risky that right now we lose the control of the tight business process what we have right now?
Yep. That's a great question. So I don't think it's all going to be dynamic. It just opens up a new opportunity for that, right? There are certain things where the process is predefined. You don't want it to veer off of that,
Okay.
like an order to cash process. You don't want an agent to get creative. It's coming directly in the way of your revenue. So there are some static workflows which human is defining, predefining, and it runs. So that doesn't change. I don't think that'll change.
Mhm.
What's going to change is more incremental on top of that. There are certain use cases that can be ad hoc and built on the fly. That's what it opens up. But at the same time, to your point, if it is going to start doing dynamic things, that what I talked about, the observability, traceability, the explainability, there are new abilities that come up where it should be able to explain why it did that, right? It's um, that starts becoming more important. And you also touched up on one thing, which is there are different kind of agents, and opens up in the next 5 to 10 years the ability to, in the dynamic world, give it a KPI, or some people call it OKRs. Give it a KPI and say, this is a goal I want you to achieve. Find the best way to do it.
Okay.
And it could be something a human never thought about in a static workflow that it can figure out and optimize for, and it
Mhm.
keeps optimizing for as it goes, right? That was never a possibility before.
How do you envision, especially the workflow developers or the practitioners, optimize this use case? Will they be just reviewing these things, or else will it be purely dynamic, or will it be like a human will be involved in making sure that what are the dynamic process that got created is reviewed before they get into the production?
Yeah, that's really the part where we are trying to figure out because all our CI/CD, our testing, everything is based on, known and predictable software development practices. This opens up a whole different world, and I don't think we've figured this out yet. Like, how are we going to test agents? And like, for instance, MCP is a good example. The spec allows you to make changes on the fly, where the tool that you provided earlier, you could add new tools. So the change management process, it opens up a way to do change management without having to pre-test it and all of that before. The question is, are we ready for it yet? Or do we want to go through the process where the client knows about the changes in the on the server side and you test it out before you put that new API out there? In this MCP world, you can just add a new capability, a new tool to an existing MCP, and an agent now suddenly is aware of this and can start using it. So there's going to be a way we eventually get there. I don't think we're there yet. There will be all kinds of vendors and tools to help you with the change management. There's going to be an ecosystem around it. So your best guess is as good as mine. And I think we need one thing we need to stop doing is take out the hat with which we've been thinking over the last few decades and figure out how do we optimize this, reduce the risk, but there are new opportunities it opens up. And if you think with the legacy thinking, it's very hard to move on to this really amazing outcome, right? That's really what we need to be open.
I hear this almost same response from the Jake Morgan last time. He was also saying the same thing, saying that as long as you think from the way you are doing things, I don't think you can able to adopt the way the new technology. You just have to start from the scratch and think like you are building something new with this technology.
Yep. And we saw this in the API world as well, right? So there was the SOAP and web services world where it was system actions that we exposed versus in the API world, we took an API first approach and a domain-driven design approach where APIs were built as building blocks in the language of the business. So I would have inventory API and product API without talking about the systems behind it. Now, because you have those building blocks and you're using this microservices kind of architecture, you can have agents that can now recognize, understand what these tools are without
Mhm.
being married to the system of record behind the scenes. So this is where I feel like if you take out that legacy thinking hat, which is what helped people transform from traditional integration into proper API-led architecture, it's the same thing here. You got to take out that having control of everything hat and say,
Mhm.
let's give it in a way where we control what the agent can do.
Mhm.
In terms of, like microservices, you give it like micro agents, like small agents that do very specific things and small tools that do specific things. And agents can figure out how to talk to other agents, how to swarm together and solve problems in very novel ways. So that's really the opportunity that we need to make sure we don't stick with the old ways.
Okay. Yeah, that makes really sense. When you're talking about this swarm and agents talking to each other, it looks like a sci-fi movie. That
Yeah,
enterprise.
that was for this. So it's not really far-fetched. My team actually has this all working in very interesting, creative ways that figures things out.
Okay. While Rupesh, like you come from the high tech industry and you see a lot of practitioners, thought leaders there on uh, the tech forefront. They are trying to adopt a lot of these technologies. But when we talk to some of the technical leaders in the other industries, right? So they still carry a lot of legacy debt, and they don't see the way the some folks from the high tech industry or Silicon Valley type of companies come from on the thought of AI and how it is going to revolutionize. So, what do you see? Do you also see within the tech industry also those type of segregation, or is it more of a traditional industry versus the high tech industry?
It's usually high tech is, early adopters for a lot of things. There are certain exceptions in other industries, but almost always high tech and fins are more um, have take advantage of these opportunities sooner than the rest of the industry. But what I'm starting to see, especially with things like the HR use case, I said automating internally, cost reduction is across the industry. There are certain horizontal needs where it's not about net new revenue, but even internally operational streamlining operations. manufacturing, which is an example of an industry usually at the tail end of adoption of technology, their margins business. For them, something like this, adopting this sooner benefits their business faster. So I'm starting to see these horizontal use cases like HR, for instance, that there's interest across the board. And I speak to CXOs from companies from different aspects. The amount of knowledge within these companies about what's happening in AI, it's different. You can see the maturity is different, but the interest in taking advantages of this opportunity is higher. So one thing I'm seeing in this year is compared to, when API-led happened, a lot of people were like in the legacy world, they're like, do we really need to, transform? Let's push that tech debt as far as we can push it. But here they're starting to realize that, hey, that whole API-led, I skipped that revolution, but there's no way I can go agentic if I don't have real-time connectivity and APIs versus my old point-to-point batch process, for instance. Waiting for that legacy migration is no longer an option. It's become a super important imperative now to get off of that. And we see that all those people who are stalling legacy migration tech, they're jumping on this now because they realize they're going to get disrupted fast without the AI building blocks in place.
So it's not no longer a wish list anymore. Yeah, that's great, Rupesh. One last question I have is on the application rationalization. This has been a topic, especially what we are seeing in the organizations is they ended up with even a bigger size organizations or a mid-size organizations. They ended up with 800 to 1,000 applications across the organization, and there a lot of CIOs are given mandate to reduce the number of applications in the organization. Do you see integration plays a critical role in that application rationalization journey? And how are there any success stories or anything you have seen in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to see the, app rationalization, if you're talking about the backend SaaS systems, for instance. The beauty with APIs was it was an abstraction layer. So whether the customer wanted to have one system behind the scene or 10 systems behind the scenes for customer data, as long as we had a customer API, we got the business protected from changes in the systems and the language of the systems, right? So, and this is my opinion, that app rationalization was, to me, is not as important as modernizing for APIs and AI. But that said, app rationalization for a CIO, obviously, it's a big imperative to reduce costs and all those things that come with it. Right? So,
That's great, Rupesh. Any final thoughts for the listeners on what they are missing out or things you like to share it across?
yeah, I mean, the main thing for customers that I would say is don't wait for this. Don't wait for everything to be fully baked out, MCP and A2A and interoperability standards, because a lot of the concepts these standards are doing are already known. It's just that how you do it in an interoperable way that's still being baked out. So don't wait for the interoperable standard aspects. Start building out the building blocks for those agents. And like I said, the building blocks are APIs that define that are tools for agents to act on. Start building that out because that'll help you with other things as well. Internal projects, reuse of this APIs are going to make projects go faster anyway. It's also going to make it easier for you. 80% of the work will be done when you get on the low risk agent architecture. It's just a matter of putting that on top of your existing API landscape. So majority of the work is going to be done. So my advice is get started on that journey right now, even if you're not looking at agentic, even if your CEO doesn't say you got to go agent first, start putting the foundation right now. That's my advice.
Okay, that's great advice. Thanks you, Rupesh. Thank you so much for joining us, and your insights have been very valuable. And yeah, it's exciting times for everybody to cross the intersection of this API and AI. At this, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning into AI Meets API. Don't forget to follow the show and share this episode with your peers.